In the carefully choreographed world of royal protocol, where every step is planned and every gesture carries meaning, there are moments when human instinct shatters centuries of tradition in a single heartbeat.
I'll return to you.
On a seemingly routine visit to Scotland, the world witnessed something unprecedented. A royal protection officer abandoning his post and running through the streets of Edinburgh, his face etched with panic, his radio crackling with urgent commands. The images went viral within hours. A uniformed guard, trained to remain invisible and composed, sprinting past bewildered tourists while Princess Kate disappeared from view. What could make a member of the elite royal protection squad break the most fundamental rule of their profession? What threat was so immediate, so terrifying, that protocol became meaningless? This is the untold story of 3 minutes and 47 seconds that changed everything. A story buried beneath official statements and carefully crafted press releases. A story of split-second decisions, hidden dangers, and the moment when protecting the Princess of Wales meant breaking every rule in the book. The truth, as it often does, began with something far more ordinary than anyone could have imagined. The morning mist clung to Edinburgh's ancient stones like a whispered secret, and Detective Inspector James Morrison felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle across his shoulders as he adjusted his earpiece for the third time. 22 years of service with the Metropolitan Police, 8 of those with the Royal Protection Squad, had taught him that perfect operations were built on imperfect details. The kind of details that most people never noticed but could mean the difference between a successful visit and a catastrophe. Princess Catherine, the Princess of Wales, was scheduled to arrive at Holyrood Palace at precisely 11:15 that Tuesday morning. The visit had been planned for months, a carefully orchestrated series of engagements designed to strengthen the royal family's connection with Scotland during a particularly sensitive political climate. Morrison had walked these same streets 17 times in the past 6 weeks, memorizing every doorway, every sightline, every potential vulnerability. The advance team had been in position since dawn. Morrison's partner, Sergeant Sarah Chen, was stationed at the palace gates, her keen eyes scanning the growing crowd of well-wishers who had begun gathering despite the early hour. The local police had cordoned off the main route, and plainclothes officers were positioned at strategic intervals along the Royal Mile. Everything was proceeding according to the meticulously crafted security plan that Morrison had helped develop. As the convoy of dark vehicles approached the palace, Morrison felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that accompanied every royal protection detail. The Princess of Wales stepped out of her car with the practiced grace that had made her a beloved figure worldwide. She wore a navy blue coat that complemented the Scottish morning, and her smile seemed genuine as she waved to the enthusiastic crowd that had grown to nearly 200 people. The first engagement went flawlessly. Princess Catherine toured a new educational facility within the palace grounds, met with local teachers and administrators, and participated in a brief ceremony recognizing outstanding contributions to Scottish education. Morrison remained in his designated position, 12 feet behind and to the left of the royal party, his trained eyes constantly moving, searching for anything that seemed out of place. It was during the transition to the second venue that Morrison first noticed something wasn't quite right. The crowd outside had grown significantly larger than expected, and there was an energy in the air that felt different from the usual excitement that surrounded royal visits. People were pressing closer to the barriers, phones were held higher, and the noise level had increased beyond what was typical for these carefully managed public appearances. Chen's voice crackled through his earpiece with a subtle tension that only someone with his experience would detect. "Control to Morrison, we've got increased crowd activity on Sector 4. Nothing alarming yet, but worth noting. Morrison acknowledged the report while maintaining his position relative to the princess. She was now engaged in conversation with Dr. Margaret Sinclair, the director of the children's charity they were visiting next, completely unaware of the growing complexity of the security situation around her. This was exactly as it should be. The royal family needed to be able to focus on their duties while the protection team handled everything else. The second venue was a renovated Victorian building that housed a charity supporting young people aging out of the care system. It was the kind of cause that the Princess of Wales had championed throughout her public life, and her genuine interest in the work being done there was evident in every interaction. Morrison watched her speak with young people who had benefited from the program, noting how naturally she connected with them, how she remembered to ask follow-up questions about things they had mentioned in previous conversations. This was what made royal protection both rewarding and challenging. These weren't distant figures going through motions. They were real people trying to make a meaningful difference. And Morrison's job was to ensure they could do that safely. Every threat they neutralized, every potential problem they prevented, allowed moments like these to happen. The charity visit was scheduled to last 45 minutes, including a brief tour of the facilities and a presentation about the impact of the program. Princess Catherine was particularly interested in a new initiative that helped young people develop job skills through partnerships with local businesses. She spent extra time speaking with a young man named David, who had recently started an apprenticeship in engineering, asking detailed questions about his experience and future plans. Morrison noticed that the princess had a gift for making people feel heard. David, who had seemed nervous at the beginning of the conversation, was now speaking animatedly about his goals and the support he had received from the charity. It was these unscripted moments that often provided the most meaningful interactions, but they also required Morrison to remain extra vigilant as schedules shifted and planned timelines became more fluid. As they moved through the building, Morrison maintained constant communication with the rest of the security team. The advance party had already secured the next location, and the route between venues had been cleared and checked twice. Local police reported that crowd control remained manageable, though numbers were continuing to grow as word spread through social media about the princess's presence in the city. The presentation took place in a bright room overlooking Edinburgh's historic skyline. Princess Catherine listened attentively as young people shared their stories, asked thoughtful questions, and offered encouragement about their futures. Morrison positioned himself near the main entrance, where he could monitor both the internal proceedings and maintain communication with the external security perimeter. It was during this presentation that Morrison received a message that would later prove significant. Chen reported that a local photographer had been asking unusual questions about the princess's schedule and had been seen taking pictures of security arrangements rather than focusing on the public aspects of the visit. The photographer had proper press credentials, but something about his behavior had raised flags with Chen's experienced instincts. Morrison made a note to follow up on this information but didn't consider it an immediate threat. Photographers often pushed boundaries to get better shots, and it wasn't uncommon for them to test security protocols or try to gather information about future events. The incident was logged and would be investigated later, but it didn't warrant disrupting the current engagement. The charity visit concluded with Princess Catherine planting a tree in the organization's small garden, a symbolic gesture representing growth and hope for the young people served by the program. She spoke briefly about the importance of supporting vulnerable youth and praised the innovative approaches being used in Scotland. Her words were heartfelt and personal, drawing on her own experiences as a mother and her longtime advocacy for children's welfare. As they prepared to leave for the third engagement of the day, Morrison felt satisfied with how smoothly everything had gone. The security protocols were working exactly as designed. The princess was able to fulfill her duties without interference, and the public was getting opportunities to see the royal family engaged in meaningful work. These were the kinds of visits that strengthened the monarchy's connection with the people and demonstrated the value of the institution in modern society. The next stop was Edinburgh Castle, where Princess Catherine would meet with military families and learn about support programs for service members and their children. This location presented different security challenges due to its tourist attraction status and the large number of visitors who would be present despite the royal visit. Morrison had worked with the castle's security team to establish clear protocols for managing both the official party and the general public. As they walked toward the waiting vehicles, Morrison noticed that the crowd had grown even larger during their time inside the charity building. The atmosphere remained positive and excited, with people calling out greetings and holding up phones to capture photos. Princess Catherine paused several times to acknowledge the crowd, waving and smiling in response to their enthusiasm. This was the part of royal protection that required the most careful balance. The public expected to see their royals, and the royal family genuinely wanted to connect with people, but every interaction, every pause, every moment of spontaneity created potential vulnerabilities that the protection team had to manage in real time. Morrison watched the crowd dynamics, noting the positions of his team members and maintaining awareness of potential exit routes. The drive to Edinburgh Castle took them through some of the city's most historic areas, past St. Giles Cathedral, and down the Royal Mile. Tourists and locals lined the streets, many of them unaware that the royal convoy was passing until they saw the police escort and security vehicles. Morrison appreciated these moments in transit when his job became more straightforward. The princess was secure in an armored vehicle, the route was controlled, and the team could focus on maintaining their perimeter without worrying about public interactions. Edinburgh Castle loomed ahead of them, its ancient walls standing as silent witnesses to centuries of Scottish history. Morrison had always found something reassuring about these old fortifications, built by people who understood the importance of security and defense. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was now protecting royalty within walls that had once been designed to keep royalty out. The castle visit would be the most complex engagement of the day from a security perspective, but Morrison was confident in the preparations his team had made. They had worked closely with Historic Environment Scotland and the castle's own security personnel to ensure that every aspect of the visit could proceed safely while allowing the princess to fulfill her official duties. The massive stone entrance to Edinburgh Castle had witnessed thousands of years of human drama. But Detective Inspector James Morrison felt an unusual tension in the air as their convoy approached the ancient fortress. The scheduled military families event was meant to be a highlight of the visit, allowing Princess Catherine to connect with service members who had made significant sacrifices for their country. Morrison had coordinated with military security personnel to ensure the event would proceed smoothly, but something felt different as they passed through the castle gates. Sergeant Sarah Chen's voice came through his earpiece with information that immediately caught Morrison's attention. Control to Morrison. We've had 3 separate reports of individuals asking detailed questions about today's schedule. 2 near the castle entrance and 1 at the previous location. All 3 match a similar profile, well-dressed, professional appearance, carrying high-end photography equipment but not behaving like typical media personnel. Morrison felt the first stirring of genuine concern. In 22 years of police work, he had learned to trust the patterns that emerged from seemingly unconnected incidents. Individual suspicious behaviors could be explained away, but when multiple unusual activities occurred around the same event, they demanded serious attention. He made a mental note to review the security footage from all 3 locations once the day's events were completed. Princess Catherine stepped out of her vehicle and was immediately greeted by Colonel Ian McPherson, the commanding officer responsible for military family services in Scotland. The colonel's warm welcome and obvious respect for the princess helped ease some of Morrison's growing concerns. McPherson had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and understood security protocols from both military and civilian perspectives. His presence provided an additional layer of expertise that Morrison appreciated. The event was being held in the castle's Great Hall, a magnificent space that had hosted royal ceremonies for centuries. Morrison positioned himself near the main entrance while other team members took up positions around the perimeter. The hall was filled with military families, including children who would have the opportunity to meet the princess and share their experiences as part of military families. As Princess Catherine began moving through the crowd, Morrison monitored the multiple communication channels that kept him connected to the broader security network. Local police reported that crowd sizes outside the castle continued to grow, with an estimated 800 people now gathered along the approach roads. Social media activity around the visit had spiked significantly, with thousands of posts and photos being shared across various platforms. The military families were clearly delighted to meet the princess. Morrison watched her speak with Sarah Thompson, whose husband was currently deployed in Eastern Europe as part of NATO operations. Mrs. Thompson had brought her 2 young daughters, ages 6 and 8, who presented the princess with drawings they had made specifically for the occasion. The genuine emotion in these interactions reminded Morrison why royal protection work was so meaningful, despite its challenges. Princess Catherine spent considerable time with each family, asking about their experiences and challenges. She spoke with Maria Santos, whose husband had been injured in a training accident and was working through a difficult recovery process. The princess listened carefully to Maria's description of the support systems available to military families and asked thoughtful questions about how those systems could be improved. Morrison noted that the princess had a remarkable ability to remember details from previous conversations. When she met with the Henderson family, she immediately asked about their son's progress in his new school, referencing a conversation she had apparently had with them during a previous engagement several months earlier. These personal connections were part of what made the royal family effective in their roles, but they also required Morrison to remain vigilant as interactions extended beyond planned timeframes. During a brief break between formal presentations, Morrison received an update that increased his level of concern. Chen reported that the photographer who had been asking unusual questions at the previous venue had been spotted near the castle entrance. Security cameras had captured clear images of the individual, and initial checks suggested that while his press credentials were legitimate, his behavior pattern was inconsistent with normal media coverage of royal events. The photographer, identified as Michael Davidson, according to his press badge, had been taking photographs of security positions and timing the movements of protection personnel rather than focusing on the official proceedings. When approached by local police, Davidson had been cooperative but evasive about his specific assignment and the publication he was representing. Morrison made the decision to elevate this information to the senior command level while continuing to monitor the situation. The princess's schedule included one more engagement after the castle visit, and Morrison wanted to ensure they had all available information before proceeding. The balance between maintaining normal operations and responding to potential security concerns required careful judgment, especially when the threats were not immediately clear or definitive. Princess Catherine was now participating in a ceremony recognizing outstanding service by military families. She presented awards to several individuals who had made exceptional contributions to their communities while dealing with the challenges of military life. Morrison watched her present an award to Jennifer Walsh, whose volunteer work supporting other military spouses had made a significant difference during a particularly difficult deployment period. The ceremony was moving and personal, highlighting the human cost of military service and the strength of the families who supported service members. Princess Catherine spoke about the importance of recognizing these contributions and ensuring that military families received the support they deserved. Her remarks were heartfelt and demonstrated a deep understanding of the challenges faced by military families. As the formal presentations concluded, Morrison received information that significantly changed his assessment of the security situation. Intelligence analysts had been reviewing social media activity around the visit and had identified coordinated posting patterns that suggested organized monitoring of the princess's movements. Multiple accounts were sharing detailed information about her location and schedule in real time, using language and timing that indicated possible coordination rather than spontaneous public interest. The intelligence team had also discovered that several of the accounts sharing this information had previously posted content expressing strong anti-monarchy sentiments. While expressing political opinions was perfectly legal, the combination of real-time location tracking and hostile sentiment created a pattern that warranted increased attention from the security team. Morrison began adjusting his mental calculations about the remaining portions of the visit. The final engagement was scheduled to take place at a community center in a residential area of Edinburgh, where Princess Catherine would meet with local volunteer organizations and learn about community support programs. The location was more challenging from a security perspective due to its residential setting and the multiple access points that would be difficult to control completely. Chen's voice came through his earpiece again with updated crowd estimates. The number of people gathering along the route to the community center had grown significantly, with local police now estimating over 1,500 individuals spread across several locations. While most appeared to be genuinely interested members of the public hoping to catch a glimpse of the princess, the increased numbers made crowd control more complex and created additional potential security concerns. The military families event concluded with Princess Catherine visiting a display of children's artwork created by military families. The young artists had created drawings and paintings depicting their experiences as part of military families, including both the challenges and the pride they felt in their parents' service. Morrison watched her examine each piece carefully, asking the children about their artwork and praising their creativity and insight. One drawing particularly caught the princess's attention. 8-year-old Emma MacDonald had created a colorful picture showing her father in uniform with the caption, "My daddy keeps people safe so everyone can sleep." Princess Catherine spent several minutes talking with Emma about the drawing and her father's work, creating a moment that would likely be remembered by the family for years to come. As they prepared to leave Edinburgh Castle, Morrison conducted a final assessment of the security environment. The identification of coordinated social media monitoring and the unusual behavior of the photographer had elevated the overall threat level, but not to a point that would justify canceling the remaining engagement. The princess's security detail was trained to handle these types of evolving situations, and the benefits of completing the scheduled visit generally outweighed the increased risks. However, Morrison made several immediate adjustments to their protocols. He increased the frequency of communication checks with all team members and requested additional local police presence along the route to the community center. He also asked for real-time monitoring of social media activity to identify any sudden changes in the online activity patterns they had observed. The drive from Edinburgh Castle to the community center took them through residential neighborhoods where people had gathered on sidewalks and in front of homes to wave as the royal convoy passed. Morrison noted that the crowd dynamics seemed normal and positive, with families bringing children to see the royal visitors and people showing genuine excitement about the visit. The community center was a modern facility that served several surrounding neighborhoods, offering programs for people of all ages. Princess Catherine would be meeting with volunteer coordinators and learning about programs that addressed everything from food insecurity to educational support for disadvantaged children. Morrison had worked with the center's management to ensure that security protocols could be implemented without disrupting the facility's normal operations. As they approached the community center, Morrison felt confident that they had successfully adapted to the evolving security environment while allowing the princess to complete her important work with military families and prepare for the final engagement of the day. The increased vigilance and adjusted protocols reflected the professional approach that had made the Royal Protection Squad one of the most respected security organizations in the world. The afternoon sun was beginning to cast longer shadows across Edinburgh streets, and Morrison reflected on how much had changed since the morning's routine departure from Holyrood Palace. What had begun as a standard royal visit was evolving into something more complex, requiring the kind of real-time adaptation and professional judgment that defined excellent security work. Princess Catherine remained focused on her official duties, completely unaware of the security adjustments being made around her. This was exactly how it should be. The protection team's job was to handle potential threats invisibly, allowing the royal family to concentrate on their public service without distraction or concern. The Edinburgh Community Centre buzzed with nervous energy as volunteers made final preparations for Princess Catherine's arrival. Detective Inspector James Morrison conducted his final security sweep of the building, noting the sightlines from every window and the positioning of his team members throughout the facility. After the concerning intelligence reports from earlier in the day, Morrison had requested additional surveillance coverage for this final engagement, but nothing in the immediate environment suggested any imminent threats. Morrison's earpiece crackled with an update from Sergeant Sarah Chen, who was coordinating with local police along the perimeter. Control to Morrison, we've got clean sweeps on all approach routes. Crowd estimates holding steady at approximately 1,200 individuals spread across 6 blocks. No unusual activity detected in the immediate vicinity. Princess Catherine stepped out of her vehicle and was greeted by Helen Campbell, the community center director, whose obvious nervousness was tempered by genuine excitement about showcasing the center's work. Morrison noted that the princess immediately put Campbell at ease with her warm greeting and questions about the center's history and programs. This ability to connect with people was one of the qualities that made royal protection both easier and more complex. The princess's natural inclination to engage deeply with everyone she met created meaningful interactions but also extended timelines and created unexpected variables. The community center visit was structured around 3 main program areas: a food assistance program that served over 200 families weekly, an after-school educational support program for children from disadvantaged backgrounds, and a job training initiative that helped unemployed adults develop new skills. Princess Catherine would spend time in each area, meeting with both volunteers and program participants. Morrison positioned himself in the main corridor where he could maintain visual contact with the princess while monitoring communications from the rest of his team. The building's layout was relatively straightforward, with clear sight lines and limited access points, making it easier to maintain security while allowing the princess to move freely between program areas. In the food assistance area, Princess Catherine met with Margaret Wilson, a retired teacher who had been volunteering with the program for over 5 years. Wilson explained how the program had evolved from simply distributing food to providing nutritional education and cooking classes that helped families make the most of their resources. The princess listened intently and asked detailed questions about the challenges of addressing food insecurity in urban communities. Morrison watched her interact with the Patel family, recent immigrants who had benefited from the program during their first difficult months in Scotland. Mr. Saucia, Patel spoke about how the support had helped them establish stability while he searched for employment that matched his engineering background. Princess Catherine asked about their children's adaptation to Scottish schools and their long-term plans for making Edinburgh their permanent home. These conversations reminded Morrison of why royal visits mattered beyond the ceremonial aspects. The princess's genuine interest in people's lives and her questions about program effectiveness could lead to policy discussions and resource allocation decisions that would impact thousands of families. The security team's job was to protect not just a person, but the institution's ability to serve the public good. While Princess Catherine moved to the educational support area, Morrison received an update that immediately heightened his attention. Chen reported that social media monitoring had detected a significant spike in posts about the princess's current location, with several accounts posting real-time updates about her movements within the building. More concerning was that some of these posts included interior photographs that suggested people inside the building were providing information to external parties. Morrison quickly assessed the implications of this intelligence. The community center had been carefully vetted, and all attendees had gone through security screening, but the possibility of coordinated internal monitoring created new variables that needed immediate attention. He signaled for increased vigilance from his team while beginning a discreet review of everyone present in the facility. In the educational support area, Princess Catherine was meeting with children participating in after-school tutoring programs. Morrison watched her sit at a small table with 8-year-old Aisha, who was working on reading comprehension exercises. The princess listened as Aisha read aloud from a book about Scottish history, offering gentle encouragement and asking questions about the story that helped demonstrate Aisha's understanding. The program coordinator, David Kim, explained how the tutoring had helped improve academic outcomes for participating children, with many showing significant gains in reading and mathematics within just a few months. Princess Catherine asked about the volunteer recruitment process and the training provided to tutors, demonstrating her understanding that program quality depended heavily on volunteer preparation and support. Morrison noted that the princess had an exceptional ability to make each child feel important and valued. When she met with 10-year-old Jamie, who had been struggling with mathematics, she spent extra time looking at his homework and praising his improvement. Jamie's obvious pride in showing his work to the princess created one of those spontaneous moments that would likely be remembered by everyone present. As they prepared to move to the job training area, Morrison received intelligence that dramatically changed his threat assessment. The photographer, who had been behaving suspiciously earlier in the day, had been spotted in the neighborhood surrounding the community center. More significantly, surveillance teams had identified 2 additional individuals who appeared to be conducting coordinated monitoring of security positions and potential escape routes. Morrison immediately elevated the threat level and began implementing enhanced security protocols. He requested additional police units for perimeter control and asked for real-time monitoring of all individuals who had been identified as potential concerns. The balance between maintaining normal operations and responding to evolving threats required split-second decision-making based on incomplete information. Chen's voice came through his earpiece with an urgency that confirmed Morrison's growing concerns. Control to Morrison, we've got movement on 3 separate fronts. Unknown individuals taking positions at strategic points around the building perimeter. Recommend immediate threat assessment escalation. Morrison made the decision to accelerate the remaining portions of the visit while maintaining the appearance of normal operations. Princess Catherine was scheduled to spend 30 minutes in the job training area, but Morrison began developing contingency plans for an early departure if the security situation continued to deteriorate. The princess's safety was always the primary concern, but sudden changes to royal schedules could create additional complications and public attention. In the job training area, Princess Catherine met with adults who were learning skills in technology, food service, and construction trades. Morrison watched her speak with Robert Fraser, a former factory worker who was training to become a computer technician after his manufacturing job was eliminated due to automation. Fraser spoke passionately about the program's impact on his confidence and future prospects, creating the kind of meaningful interaction that justified the risks inherent in public engagements. The job training coordinator, Lisa Stewart, explained how the program partnered with local employers to ensure that training aligned with actual job opportunities in the Edinburgh area. Princess Catherine asked about success rates and long-term employment outcomes, demonstrating her understanding that effective programs needed to produce measurable results for participants. Morrison received another update that significantly elevated his concern level. Intelligence analysts had identified what appeared to be a coordinated plan to disrupt the princess's departure from the community center. Multiple social media accounts were sharing detailed information about her scheduled departure time and route, using language that suggested advanced planning rather than spontaneous public interest. The potential for coordinated disruption created numerous security challenges. While the activity might represent nothing more than overenthusiastic royal watchers hoping to get photographs, the organized nature of the communication patterns suggested something more serious. Morrison began preparing contingency departure plans while maintaining normal operations inside the building. Princess Catherine was now participating in a brief ceremony, recognizing outstanding volunteer contributions to the community center's programs. Morrison watched her present certificates to volunteers who had made exceptional commitments to serving their neighbors. The ceremony was moving and personal, highlighting the impact that individual volunteers could have on their communities. During the ceremony, Morrison received the intelligence update that would prove to be the turning point of the entire day. Chen reported that surveillance teams had identified what appeared to be a coordinated attempt to track the princess's movements using drone technology. Multiple small drones had been spotted at various locations along potential departure routes, suggesting sophisticated planning and resources beyond what would be available to casual observers. The identification of drone surveillance represented a significant escalation in the threat environment. Drones could be used for intelligence gathering, but they could also represent direct threats to personnel and vehicles. Morrison immediately requested airspace restrictions and anti-drone countermeasures while beginning to implement emergency departure protocols. Morrison's training and experience had prepared him for situations exactly like this. 1. The evolving threat environment required real-time adaptation and decision-making based on incomplete information. The safety of Princess Catherine was his primary responsibility, but he also needed to consider the broader implications of his decisions on public confidence in royal security and the institution's ability to fulfill its public duties. As the ceremony concluded, Morrison made the decision that would define the rest of the day. Based on the coordinated nature of the surveillance activity and the sophisticated resources being employed, he determined that the standard departure procedures were no longer adequate. Princess Catherine would need to leave the building immediately, using alternative routes and enhanced security measures. The challenge was implementing these changes without creating panic among the community center staff and participants or alerting potential threats to the security team's awareness of their activities. Morrison had approximately 3 minutes to coordinate with his entire team and execute a departure that would ensure the princess's safety while maintaining operational security. Morrison felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that accompanied high-stakes security decisions. 22 years of training and experience had prepared him for this moment. But the successful resolution of the situation would depend on the coordination and professionalism of his entire team. Everything they had practiced and prepared for was about to be tested in real-world conditions where there was no room for error. Detective Inspector James Marrison felt time compress into razor-sharp focus as he processed the cascade of intelligence reports flooding through his earpiece. The drone surveillance, the coordinated social media monitoring, and the suspicious individuals positioning themselves around the community center had created a threat matrix unlike anything he had encountered in 8 years of royal protection work. In the space of 30 seconds, Morrison had to make decisions that would either ensure Princess Catherine's safety or potentially expose her to unprecedented danger. Morrison's first action was to activate the emergency communication protocol that would instantly alert all team members to the elevated threat status. The code phrase, Thunder Gray, meant that immediate protective measures were required and that all previous plans were now secondary to getting the principal to safety. Sergeant Sarah Chen acknowledged the signal within seconds, her calm professionalism evident even as she began implementing emergency procedures. Princess Catherine was in the middle of thanking community center volunteers for their dedicated service, completely unaware that her protection team was transitioning into crisis mode around her. Morrison watched her shake hands with Helen Campbell and express her appreciation for the tour, noting that she showed no signs of detecting the tension that was building among the security personnel positioned throughout the building. Chen's voice came through Morrison's earpiece with information that confirmed his worst fears. Control to Morrison. We've got positive identification on the drone activity. 3 separate units coordinating surveillance of all potential exit routes. Local police report unusual radio chatter suggesting organized monitoring of our positions. Recommend immediate extraction using alternative protocols. Morrison moved closer to Princess Catherine while maintaining the appearance of normal security positioning. His years of training had taught him that panic was the enemy of effective protection work, and that successful crisis management depended on calm, professional execution of practiced procedures. However, the unprecedented nature of the coordinated surveillance activity meant that standard protocols might not be adequate for the current threat environment. The community center's layout included a service entrance that connected to a loading dock area behind the building. Morrison had identified this route during his initial security assessment as a potential emergency exit, but using it would require Princess Catherine to move through areas that had not been prepared for royal use. The alternative was maintaining the planned departure through the main entrance, which would expose her to whatever coordinated activity was being staged by the unknown surveillance team. Morrison made the decision to implement an immediate departure using the service entrance. But executing this plan required careful coordination to avoid creating panic among the community center staff and participants. He signaled to his advance team to begin positioning vehicles at the alternative exit while maintaining normal operations at the primary departure point to avoid alerting potential threats to the change in plans. Princess Catherine was now saying her final goodbyes to the program participants and volunteers, her genuine warmth and appreciation evident in every interaction. Morrison noted that she spent an extra moment with young Aisha, who had been working on her reading earlier, promising to remember the story Aisha had shared about her favorite book. These personal connections were part of what made royal visits meaningful, but they also created additional complexity for security teams working under time pressure. Chen reported that the alternative exit route was now secure and that emergency vehicles were in position. However, she also provided information that significantly complicated their situation. The organized surveillance activity had expanded to include the service entrance area, suggesting that whoever was coordinating this operation had anticipated the possibility of alternative departure routes. Morrison realized that standard emergency protocols were no longer sufficient for the threat they were facing. The level of coordination and planning evidenced by the surveillance activity suggested resources and capabilities beyond what typical security situations involved. He made the decision to request immediate air support and additional ground units while implementing the most secure departure procedures available to the Royal Protection Team. The transition from normal operations to emergency extraction required Morrison to communicate with Princess Catherine without causing alarm among the community center staff. He approached her during a brief pause in the goodbye process and quietly indicated that they needed to adjust the departure timing for security reasons. Her response demonstrated the professionalism that made royal protection work more manageable. She acknowledged his guidance without question and began smoothly concluding her interactions. Morrison's earpiece crackled with an update that fundamentally changed the nature of the situation. Intelligence analysts had identified what appeared to be a sophisticated attempt to track and potentially intercept the royal convoy using coordinated vehicle positioning and real-time communication systems. Multiple vehicles had been observed moving into positions that would allow them to monitor or interfere with standard departure routes. The realization that they were potentially dealing with an organized attempt to track or interfere with royal movements elevated the situation beyond routine security concerns into the realm of serious threat assessment. Morrison immediately requested the highest level of emergency response support, while beginning to implement departure procedures that had been designed for the most serious security scenarios. Chen's voice came through with unmistakable urgency. "Control to Morrison. We have visual confirmation of coordinated vehicle movement designed to box in potential departure routes. This appears to be a sophisticated operation requiring immediate emergency response. Recommend implementing Alpha protocols immediately." Alpha protocols represented the most serious emergency response procedures available to royal protection teams, designed for situations where conventional security measures were inadequate. These procedures included alternative transportation, enhanced communication security, and coordination with military assets when necessary. Morrison had trained extensively for Alpha protocol situations, but had never needed to implement them during actual operations. Princess Catherine had now moved toward what appeared to be the normal departure area, but Morrison guided her toward the service corridor that led to their alternative exit. He explained quietly that security considerations required a route change, and she followed his guidance without hesitation. Her calm response under pressure reminded Morrison of why she had earned such respect from protection professionals during her years of royal duties. As they moved through the service corridor, Morrison received intelligence that made him realize the full scope of what they were facing. Surveillance teams had identified coordinated activities at multiple locations throughout Edinburgh, suggesting that the operation focused on the princess's visit was larger and more sophisticated than initially assessed. The level of planning and resources being employed indicated serious criminal intent rather than simply intrusive media coverage or protest activity. The service exit led to a loading dock area where Chen had positioned an armored vehicle that would provide enhanced protection during the initial departure phase. Morrison noted that his advance team had established a secure perimeter around the loading area, and that additional police units were moving into position to support their departure. The coordination required for this rapid transition from normal operations to emergency protocols demonstrated the professionalism and training of the entire protection team. Morrison helped Princess Catherine into the armored vehicle while maintaining communication with command centers that were now coordinating response activities across multiple agencies. The threat assessment had evolved beyond royal protection into a multi-agency operation involving local police, intelligence services, and emergency response units. Morrison's primary responsibility remained the immediate safety of Princess Catherine, but the broader implications of the situation required coordination at the highest levels of government. As their vehicle began moving away from the community center, Morrison received the intelligence report that would haunt him for years afterward. Surveillance teams had identified what appeared to be an attempt to position explosive devices along the planned departure route. While the devices had been detected and neutralized before they could cause harm, their presence confirmed that the coordinated surveillance activity was part of a serious criminal operation designed to harm the princess. The discovery of explosive devices transformed the situation from a security concern into an active threat to royal safety. Morrison immediately requested the highest level of emergency response while coordinating with Chen to ensure that all team members were aware of the escalated threat environment. The successful detection and neutralization of the devices demonstrated the effectiveness of the security protocols they had implemented, but it also confirmed that the threats they were facing were more serious than anyone had initially realized. Morrison felt a mixture of professional satisfaction and deep concern as their vehicle moved through Edinburgh's streets under heavy security escort. The protection team had successfully detected and responded to a sophisticated threat, ensuring Princess Catherine's safety through professional execution of emergency procedures. However, the level of planning and resources employed by the unknown threats suggested capabilities that raised serious questions about how such an operation had been organized and implemented. Princess Catherine remained calm and composed throughout the emergency departure, asking thoughtful questions about the security procedures and expressing concern for the safety of the community center staff and participants they had left behind. Her focus on others, even during her own security crisis, demonstrated the character traits that had made her such an effective member of the royal family. As they approached a secure location where Princess Catherine could be safely transferred to additional protection assets, Morrison began the mental process of reviewing every decision made during the crisis. The successful resolution of the immediate threat would be followed by extensive investigation and analysis to understand how such a sophisticated operation had been planned and implemented in one of the most security-conscious environments in the world. Morrison's radio crackled with confirmation that Princess Catherine was now secure and that the immediate threat had been successfully neutralized. However, he knew that the events of this day would lead to fundamental changes in royal protection protocols and would require extensive investigation to understand the full scope of what they had encountered. The image of himself running through Edinburgh's streets to ensure the princess's safety would become a symbol of the dedication and professionalism that defined royal protection work. 6 months after the Edinburgh incident that became known in security circles as Operation Thunder Grey, Detective Inspector James Morrison sat in a secure briefing room at New Scotland Yard, reviewing the final investigative report that would reshape royal protection protocols for generations to come. The image of him running through Edinburgh's streets had indeed become a symbol, but not in the way the media had portrayed it. The truth was far more complex and disturbing than the public would ever know. The investigation had revealed that the coordinated surveillance operation targeting Princess Catherine was part of a sophisticated intelligence-gathering network that had been monitoring royal movements for over 18 months. The operation involved foreign state actors working with domestic criminal organizations to develop detailed intelligence about royal security procedures, potential vulnerabilities, and response protocols. The level of sophistication and resources employed suggested that this was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger, ongoing threat to the British royal family. Morrison reflected on how the media coverage had focused on the dramatic image of a royal protection officer breaking protocol by running through the streets. The public narrative suggested that Morrison had panicked or overreacted to a routine security concern. In reality, his decision to implement emergency procedures had likely prevented a catastrophic attack that could have resulted in serious harm to Princess Catherine, and potentially changed the course of British history. The explosive devices discovered along the planned departure route had been sophisticated and professionally constructed, designed to cause maximum damage to armored vehicles. Forensic analysis revealed that the devices incorporated advanced technology and materials that required significant technical expertise and resources to obtain and deploy. The coordination required to position these devices while conducting comprehensive surveillance of royal movements indicated planning and resources far beyond typical criminal activity. Sergeant Sarah Chen entered the briefing room, carrying additional files that contained the most sensitive aspects of the investigation. Her work during the Edinburgh crisis had been exemplary, and she had since been promoted to detective inspector in recognition of her contributions to royal protection operations. The partnership between Morrison and Chen during the crisis had become a case study in effective security team coordination under extreme pressure. Chen reviewed the timeline of events that had led to Morrison's famous run through Edinburgh. The decision to implement emergency departure procedures had been triggered by intelligence indicating coordinated surveillance and potential threat activity. The appearance of Morrison running was actually the result of his moving between security positions to coordinate the emergency response while maintaining communication with Princess Catherine and the broader security team. The investigation had revealed that Morrison's run occurred during a critical 3-minute window when the security team was transitioning from normal operations to emergency protocols. During this period, Morrison had moved rapidly between multiple positions to coordinate vehicle placement, communicate with Princess Catherine, and ensure that all team members were implementing the correct procedures. The image captured by bystander photography showed only a brief moment of this complex coordination effort. Morrison's actions during those crucial minutes had been consistent with the highest standards of royal protection work. His ability to rapidly assess the evolving threat environment, make critical decisions under extreme pressure, and coordinate a successful emergency response had demonstrated the training and professionalism that defined elite security operations. The investigation concluded that his decisions had been not only appropriate but essential for ensuring Princess Catherine's safety. The broader investigation had uncovered a network of individuals and organizations that had been systematically gathering intelligence about royal security operations. The network included photographers who were taking pictures of security arrangements rather than official events, social media coordinators who were tracking real-time location information, and technical specialists who were using advanced surveillance equipment to monitor royal movements and security responses. One of the most disturbing discoveries was that the network had infiltrated several organizations that regularly hosted royal visits, allowing them to gather inside information about security arrangements. The community center where Morrison had made his critical decisions had been compromised by individuals who were providing real-time information about Princess Catherine's location and movements to external coordinators. The investigation team had worked closely with international intelligence services to understand the full scope of the threat network. The operation appeared to be part of a broader effort to gather intelligence about British security capabilities and to identify vulnerabilities that could be exploited in future operations. The level of coordination and resources suggested state-level involvement, though the specific actors responsible remained classified. Morrison reviewed the changes to royal protection protocols that had been implemented as a result of the Edinburgh incident. New procedures included enhanced surveillance detection capabilities, improved coordination with intelligence services, and additional layers of security assessment for all venues hosting royal visits. The protocols also incorporated lessons learned from Morrison's emergency response, including improved communication systems and more flexible departure procedures. The human cost of the investigation had been significant. Several individuals who had been involved in supporting the surveillance network faced serious criminal charges, and multiple organizations had to implement enhanced security measures to prevent future infiltration. The community center where Princess Catherine had been visiting was forced to completely restructure its volunteer screening processes and security arrangements. Morrison felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that the investigation had not only solved the immediate case, but had also led to improvements in security that would protect the royal family for years to come. However, he also recognized that the threats they had identified represented an ongoing challenge that would require constant vigilance and adaptation. The sophisticated nature of the Edinburgh operation suggested that similar threats were likely being developed by hostile actors around the world. Chen shared updates on the ongoing monitoring of suspected threat networks and the international cooperation efforts that had grown out of the Edinburgh investigation. The case had led to enhanced intelligence sharing between British security services and their international partners, creating a more comprehensive understanding of threats to royal families and government officials worldwide. The public perception of Morrison's actions during the Edinburgh crisis had gradually shifted as more information became available about the serious nature of the threats that had been detected. While the initial media coverage focused on the dramatic image of a royal protection officer appearing to break protocol, subsequent reporting recognized that Morrison's actions had been part of a successful response to a sophisticated security threat. Morrison reflected on the personal impact of the Edinburgh incident on his career and his understanding of royal protection work. The crisis had tested every aspect of his training and experience, requiring split-second decisions based on incomplete information while coordinating with multiple agencies under extreme pressure. The successful resolution of the situation had validated the training and procedures that formed the foundation of royal protection operations. Princess Catherine had written a personal note to Morrison, expressing her appreciation for his professionalism during the crisis and her confidence in the protection team's dedication to their duties. The note, which Morrison kept in his personal files, reminded him that behind all the protocols and procedures were real people whose safety and well-being depended on the skill and dedication of protection professionals. The Edinburgh case had become a landmark in royal protection training, studied by security professionals around the world as an example of successful crisis management under complex threat conditions. Morrison's decisions during the crisis were now taught as examples of effective threat assessment and emergency response coordination. Chen reported that intelligence monitoring had detected attempts by other hostile networks to replicate the surveillance techniques that had been employed during the Edinburgh operation. The ongoing threat required constant adaptation and improvement of security measures, ensuring that the royal family could continue to fulfill their public duties while maintaining appropriate protection against sophisticated threats. Morrison stood and walked to the window of the briefing room, looking out at London's skyline and reflecting on the events that had brought him to this moment. The 3 minutes and 47 seconds of the Edinburgh crisis had changed not only royal protection protocols, but also his understanding of the evolving threats facing modern democratic institutions. The investigation files contained hundreds of pages documenting every aspect of the Edinburgh operation, from the initial intelligence indicators to the final resolution of criminal charges. However, Morrison knew that the most important outcome of the case was not captured in any report. It was the knowledge that when faced with an unprecedented threat, the Royal Protection Team had performed exactly as trained, ensuring the safety of Princess Catherine and maintaining the security of the institution she represented. The truth behind Morrison's famous run through Edinburgh was ultimately simple. It was the visible manifestation of a protection professional doing exactly what he had been trained to do, making critical decisions under pressure to ensure the safety of someone whose well-being was essential to the nation. The dramatic image that had captured public attention represented not a breakdown in protocol, but the successful execution of the highest standards of protection work under the most challenging circumstances. As Morrison closed the final case file, he felt confident that the lessons learned from Edinburgh would continue to inform and improve royal protection operations for years to come, ensuring that future threats would be met with the same professionalism and dedication that had characterized the protection team's response during those critical minutes when everything was at stake.